Welkom terug. 'n Uitgebreide, uiters winsgewende maar dodelike heroïnemark word reg oor Suid-Afrika bedryf. Daar word geskat dat sowat 100,000 mense in die land die dwelmmiddel gebruik of daaraan verslaaf is. Daarom het die sogenaamde Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime of ENACT project die week 'n verslag hieroor bekendgestel deur die Instituut vir Sekuriteitsstudies. Jammer. Nou om die verslag te bespreek sluit Shaun Shelly. Hy's 'n navorser van die Universiteit van Pretoria se departement gesinsmedisyne by ons aan. Shaun is in Kaapstad. Hy's ook die hoof van beleid en voorspraak by die organisasie TB HIV Care. Shaun, goeienaand en welkom.
Good evening, Elvis.
Shaun, jy's verbonde aan die Universiteit van Pretoria en jy het nou die verslag is nou net bekend gestel, maar kom ons begin eers by die basiese beginsel. Vertel net vir ons eers, wat is heroïne en hoekom is dit so 'n probleem vir Suid-Afrika?
Heroin is an opioid, which means it's a narcotic drug, which actually turns into morphine in your body. And what that means is it's a pain reliever. It relieves both physical and mental pain. But then when you stop taking it, you start getting withdrawals, which makes you feel pretty sick and pretty awful. And so the way to take those away is to have some more of it. So unlike other drugs, or a lot of other drugs, should I say, it has this withdrawal potential for it, which makes people more likely to continue using it.
What are the contributing factors that lead to this drive of heroin, of the heroin market in South Africa?
So I think the contributing factors are actually the socio-political climate in South Africa is a major contributing factor. You know, the economic exclusion of certain parts of the population. You know, it makes quite a lot of sense, as the report says, for somebody living on the street who's hungry, who's got a lot of pain, both physical and emotional, to actually use something like heroin because it serves a purpose. It makes life very bearable for them. And people who are living in abject poverty or in difficult circumstances might find this pretty attractive, you know, to use, despite the apparent negative effects on it. And of course, the negative effects are mainly due to the contaminants that are in the drug, because you're not buying a pure drug of known quantity or quality, or you don't even know what concentration it is. And this can cause a lot of damage to people, especially when they start injecting the drug and they don't have access to sterile injecting equipment. You know, we're starting to see huge levels of hepatitis C, increased levels of HIV amongst people who inject drugs in the country. And these are some of the major concerns and problems. But the contributing factors are really the socio-economic circumstances that people find themselves in.
But it seems that there's a specific focus of these criminal syndicates on very poor and marginalized communities. Why do you think that is the case?
I think the thing is that it's just more visible in poor and marginalized communities. We know from population studies, which we don't have in South Africa, we've got them from the United States and other markets, but typically speaking, we know that across the board, people of whatever economic status use drugs at sort of the same amount. You know, in the United States, for example, 52% of people have experimented with drugs that are deemed illicit. Right across the socioeconomic groups of people, no matter what level you are, no matter what echelon you are. But it's marginalized communities and poorer communities that suffer the consequences more, because they don't have access to services, and also because they get highly marginalized and usually criminalized because of it. And once you've got a criminal record, it's very difficult to get a job. So there's this perpetual cycle of being marginalized and being excluded, and it's increased with the current punitive policies that we have, and also lack of access to healthcare mean that people in marginalized communities suffer a lot more and therefore become dependent more easily than other people do.
Now, the report Hiding in Plain Sight, Heroin's Stealthy Takeover of South Africa, highlights the gaps of policy with regards to heroin in the country. Take us through the policy and what are those policies that they are referring to?
So, for example, on the health side, well, actually the most glaring policy gap is that we don't have a national drug master plan at the moment. That was supposed to have been released over a year ago. We've got no sign of it yet. You know, that's the document that's supposed to direct policy in the country, or put a plan in place that matches policy in the country. We also don't have a central drug authority at the moment. All the terms of office expired a little while ago. No new contracts have been issued. So we're actually pretty rudderless from the top down, in terms of drug policy in the country at the moment. The National Department of Health are taking some actions, though, and we've got a number of gaps in harm reduction services. So, for example, people who using heroin, which is, by the way, Niobe as well, and Wunga and Unga, those drugs all contain heroin. And we need harm reduction policies such as opioid substitution therapy. Currently, methadone in this country, the medication that's used to treat these kind of disorders, is 100 times more expensive than anywhere else in the world, or than a lot of places in the world, should I say. And we've also got a gap in providing sterile injecting equipment to people and services based in the primary care setting or in the community setting. We don't have them.
Mm-hmm. Take us through some of the recommendations that the ENACT report is giving us.
Well, the ENACT report is actually very interesting because they don't go for the typical drug war rhetoric. They actually take a very sensible and well-researched stance on it. And what they're suggesting is, first of all, we need to invest more money in research and finding out what's going on. We need to look at the transnational criminal organizations, but that's only part of the picture. In a community level and on the ground in South Africa, what we need to do is reevaluate punitive policies that criminalize people who use drugs, because this is creating a perpetual cycle, and the UN agrees with this. They've just released a report from all the heads of the various UN bodies saying that criminalization is doing more harm than good, and it's having a huge impact on public health, especially on HIV and hepatitis C. So we need to re-examine that. And then, most importantly, we need to look at the marginalization and socio-economic exclusion of large proportions of our population. So we should redivert the funding that's currently being used to police drugs into the communities and into health services for people. Those are, in essence, the recommendations that are contained within this report.
Now, if those recommendations are ignored, what is the future for heroin users in this country?
Well, a lot of them will die. We're very fortunate at this stage because we're not seeing a lot of the very, very strong opioids coming into the country, the synthetic ones such as fentanyl. In the United States, they've got that, and we're seeing more overdose deaths than car accident deaths in the United States at the moment, which is a frightening prospect. In South Africa, we have none of the recommended medications easily available to treat overdose, and we'd see a lot of people dying. We're also beginning to see already incredibly high rates of hepatitis C. So the injecting drug population in Pretoria have a prevalence of 93% of hepatitis C, which is astounding. And over 40% of them have HIV as well. So these are the kinds of consequences we're going to see. But we're also seeing people affected by TB. We're seeing people dying of sepsis, which nobody should die of in today's world. And we're seeing infective endocarditis as well. So there'd be a lot more deaths. There'd be a lot of burden on the health system. And our communities would be further damaged, I believe.
So how do we convince government that this is the route to go, you think?
I think that government will move in whichever direction the majority of the public asks them to move. You know, there are a lot of people there who do recognize these problems. There are a lot of barriers, bureaucratic barriers in place. But I think that there isn't really a political will to go against what the majority of people believe is the right thing to do, which is just repeat the same old rhetoric we've had before, to talk about the war on drugs, to clamp down on people who use drugs. So we really need to educate people at all levels of the policy debate, and in particular we need to be talking to communities and showing them how these policies can work and will benefit them. And once we've done that, I think the politicians will follow suit. So I'm hoping that will happen.
Mr. Shelly, I thank you so much for your contribution. That was Shaun Shelly. Hy is verbonde aan die Universiteit van Pretoria as ook 'n TB HIV care. En nou as jy meer inligting hieroor wil hê, die ENACT rapport, gaan kyk op die Nuusdag om 8 blad op Facebook. Ons het 'n opsomming van die verslag daar opgelaai net vir jou. Nou dis al van Nuusdag Perspektief se kant af vanaand. Geniet jou aand. Totsiens.